Hello viewers, and welcome to Uxbridge Cable Television. I'm Andy Kuros, and today I'm here with a special guest, Mr. Wayne Tanson, a teacher who has just announced his retirement.
Thank you, Andy.
As all the viewers are wondering at home, Mr. Tanson, how long have you been teaching here?
I've been teaching at Uxbridge High since 2002, that's 14 years. I started teaching in September of 1980 at a small vocational school in Norwich, Connecticut. I transferred to Diamond Regional Vocational Technical High School in Fall River, stayed there for 3.5 or 4 years, and spent a year in Walpole, that's Walpole High, and then I transferred to Milford High, which I thought was going to be my home for the rest of my teaching career, and then I discovered Uxbridge.
That's great.
Thank you.
So you seem to be a teacher that everyone enjoys and you always have a smile on your face. But if you could point to one thing in your career, what would be your favorite part about teaching?
My favorite part about teaching is working with all of the lab equipment and setting up experiments and things like that where students are able to collect, analyze, and interpret the data, which was not true at the other schools that I taught at, which is the attraction to coming here. I knew that we had the probeware and software and things like that. So that was the big attraction for me.
And you've taught over thousands of students over your lengthy career in education. What would you say if you've noticed any common traits through students who have been successful in your classes?
Drive, determination, stick-to-itiveness. Those students that will learn from making a mistake, where it doesn't seem to bother them. If they have to repeat a procedure over again, that's fine. Some people are adverse to having a bit of failure in their life, but without falling on your face a couple of times and not having the success that you'd like, I think that's pretty good characteristic.
Great. And if you could turn the clock back 30 years and you were told you could not be an educator, what other career paths would you have chosen?
Oddly enough, I'd love to have been a weatherman. One of the things that I would really like to do someday is to spend a couple of weeks on top of Mount Washington, observing the weather and just doing the famous walk outside in the middle of the winter with 100+ mile-an-hour winds. I've always been interested in weather, and I think with all the technology that we have today, like this wonderful studio, I think that would be a fun thing to do. And I like Matt Noyes. A little shout out to Matt Noyes.
And as you're getting ready to retire and you look back on your teaching career as a whole, how do you think education has changed over the years?
Well, it used to be what is referred to as chalk and talk. Teacher would get up at the board with some chalk and talk. Students would take notes and then practice. Well, now it's much more interactive. We get up there and say a little something and allow the students to participate in the actual process. And we refer to it as being the guide on the side as opposed to being the sage on stage.
And finally, as a teacher notorious for his endless amount of stories that make students love your classes so much, can you tell me the funniest thing that's ever happened in one of your classrooms or one of your famous stories?
Funniest thing that ever happened. Jesus.
Put you on the spot.
Yeah, I know, you did. You put me on the spot. Well, I'll tell you a story first. I'd like to do a shout out to Mr. Bill Johnson, who was my physics teacher in high school. I first had him for algebra in the 8th grade. Mr. Johnson and I did not get along very well. I eventually had him for physics senior year, and we did not get along really well. But just because I didn't get along with him doesn't mean I didn't learn a heck of a lot. I was a rather immature, bratty kind of kid in high school. And as I've gotten older, I've realized that I've used so much of the little techniques, the little expressions, and so forth. Bill Johnson was the inspiration for Buzz Lightyear. Not very many people know that. A lot of people think that it's Buzz Aldrin, but it was actually Bill Johnson. We used to call him Buzzer. I think it's because he had a buzz cut. I'm not really sure. Nice fellow. I saw him several months back at my aunt's funeral, and he shook my hand and congratulated me on my future retirement and so forth. And he's still in education. He teaches at a private school in Reading, I believe. And he's probably 5 or 6 years older than me. He was a new teacher when, well, he's probably a little more than 5 or 6 years, but he was a new teacher to the school when I had him in 8th grade. He was a straight-up guy, learned an awful lot from him. Now for a story. All right, my mom. I love my mom, but she wanted me to become a doctor. The last thing I wanted to do was become a doctor. My mom thought it was because she thought that, you know, since I used to like to hunt and fish, that I could gut a fish and clean a raccoon skin off and no problem. Blood and guts didn't bother me. It didn't. But I just really didn't want to be a doctor. I didn't really know what I wanted to do when I went to college. So my mother set up an opportunity for me to observe a autopsy at what was Boston City Hospital. I don't even know what it's called today. So I went into Boston City Hospital with my Aunt Mary, who worked at the hospital, and she said, well, dress up in garb, you know, the little booties and the sweatpants and the shirt and the hat and the mask and so forth. So I went in and I helped the guy bring the stiff out. He marked it up with a magic marker and highlighter and so forth. Oh boy, I was just enthusiastic. Oh, this is going to be cool. And he told us exactly what he was going to do, how he was going to cut. Well, he made one cut and the smell was god awful. I fainted and fell like a sequoia tree, right on the ground. I don't remember doing it, but I do remember waking up in the on-call room. If any of you ever watched any shows with doctors and nurses, it's like an on-call room, which is basically like a locker room. So I woke up completely disoriented. I stuck my head out the door, and I'm like, hi. And I was like 17 or 18 years old. I was still a little squeaky little boy. And they said, how can I help you? I said, where's my Auntie Mary? And so forth. Well, 2 gentlemen came down the hallway, and they said, oh, come with me, sir. And I'm like, oh, okay. Well, next thing I know, they're literally slipping a straitjacket onto me because there was a gentleman who had escaped from the psych ward and that apparently matched my description. And I'm like, oh, you want me to put on this sweater? Oh, that's fine. I'm a little cold. And the next thing I know, I was all wrapped up. Hey, give me my Auntie Mary. Well, to make a long story short, they eventually figured out that I was not the psycho they thought that I thought I was. But that was an interesting experience. I'll never forget that. Of course, it took me hours to locate my Aunt Mary because she had gone home. She thought I had made my way after the autopsy. And so, you know, I called her up. Now, today we have cell phones. You can pick up the cell phone and call her. Well, I had to, you know, beg for a phone. And of course, it was a long-distance phone call, which was going to cost somebody money and so forth and so on. Eventually, she came to pick me up, and she thought that was the funniest thing that's imaginable. And she bought me a pizza, and the rest is history. So thanks, Mary. Appreciate it. Mom, I appreciate it too.
That was great, Mr. Tanson. Any last words or anything you'd like to say before you leave here?
A famous quotation from one of my favorite singers. His name is David Crosby. David Crosby, Stephen Stills, and the late Paul Kantner wrote a song called Wooden Ships. And the first words are, when you smile at me, I will understand. That is something everybody everywhere does in the same language. So a smile has always meant a lot to me. And I love that quotation, and I love Crosby, Stills, Nash & Young. So thank you, everybody. Peace and love.
Thank you so much, Mr. Tanson, for your time.
Thank you, Andrew.
And I wish you luck in your next journey in your life.
It will be a journey.